Around about 2,000 miles ago, yeah, almost exactly 2,000 miles ago, I was just shy of 180,000. I did an engine flush using the Liqui Moly product, Proline product, and so I thought I'd just do a quick follow-up with my thoughts about how I found it and any tips or recommendations if you choose to do this yourself. The most obvious starting point is that I'm very pleased I used it. It worked out well, in my opinion. There's a couple of things that I would do differently if I was to use it, and I have actually used it again on other cars. The most notable thing, if you've had a high mileage diesel, is that when you do an oil change, what you can find is that after maybe 500 miles, sometimes even less, the oil can be pretty black. And what I've found after using the flush is we've still got, you can see the X's, the markings on the dipstick, and you can still clearly see those, and the oil has still got a very definite golden colour. Now previously, you would do an oil change and the oil would be black, like I say, very, very quickly. So it certainly kept the oil a lot cleaner, and I presume that's basically because it's cleaned the engine block, and so when the new oil goes in, it's not spending its time clearing out old remnants and what have you. I still think there's quite a lot of old remnants in there, and that's part of the reason why I would use it in a slightly different way if I was to use it again. Biggest thing that I would do differently is how I would actually conduct the oil change, because I think this works so effectively. If you're doing it using old oil, there's a good chance that the old oil hasn't really got any carrying capacity to actually carry the debris that this then loosens off. So what I would actually do is do a change with a cheap mineral oil. I would get the old oil out, change the filter, put a cheap mineral oil in, which costs about £1 a litre. Then I would run the car for maybe 50 miles, nothing major. Then I would use the flush on the cheap oil, and the cheap oil is still fresh. It's got loads of carrying capacity, and because you're changing it out almost instantly, it's also not an expensive way of doing it. So for me, what I've ended up doing is, I'm going to give it another flush just out of curiosity, but I'm using fully synthetic oil, which is, it's not cheap. So so my way of doing it this time around is quite an expensive way. So yeah, definitely change your oil for a cheap one, run it for 50 miles, put the flush in, then change it out, then put your quality oil in and filter, and that would be a much better way. The other thing as well is how to drain your engine. Obviously most garages, they will have the car on a 4-post lift and they'll have the car level, and I would say that it's very important to have the car level when you're doing the engine drain, when you're getting the old oil out. I think if you've got too much of an angle, which I had last time, there's a chance, certainly like with things like the oil cooler at the back of this engine, it's underneath so you can't really see it, but there's an oil cooler at the back of the block that can store oil if the vehicle's back at an angle like that. And I just think that engines are designed to be to have the oil changed when they're level, and that's a kind of basic mistake that I made when using the flush, because you don't get everything out. I mean, you're not going to get everything out anyway, however good your oil change is, but I reckon I had about 800 mil of old oil in there, and it's, of course, when you're using a flush, you're not just leaving in old oil. What you're actually leaving in is the flushed oil. So this here, I mean, this is a bit more than 800 mil. 800 mil would probably come to about here. I've got still in the car around about that much of the thickest, blackest, foulest oil. I mean, it's pure black, jet black. So obviously the better you drain and the longer you can drain it, I would even leave it overnight to drain. The longer you can leave it to get the old oil out, the less you're going to have of this knocking around inside the car. So yeah, that's a pretty important thing. So do an oil change with mineral oil, then use the flush, get your car level, and in order for it to drain correctly. And for me, you won't go too far wrong. Obviously, whether you choose to use it or not is your choice. I can't recommend you use an engine flush, as I said in the previous video. So I'm just thinking if there's anything else that I'm going to say. Yeah, I'm just going to do another video where I actually use the flush on relatively fresh oil, 2,000 mile oil. Like I say, it's just out of curiosity, because I just want to see if it can make, still relatively clean oil. I want to see if another flush will bring out any more, and see what happens there. So it's worth also noting that I've seen quite basic flushes being done where people pour diesel into the tank, and to be honest, I'm not sure this flush is that much different from that kind of concept. Certainly the smell of it does smell quite diesely, quite petrol-y. So I think it's just kind of like another version of doing that to thin all the oil, to make it more pourable, but also have some detergents in there to clean the block. As for all the claims that it made, well, I was a little bit dismissive, a little bit sceptical, but I am convinced that it has improved compression. The engine has definitely felt more lively since I used this, and maybe it has restored a bit of compression, but without doing a compression test before and after, you can't really confirm that. So as for all the claims, I can't verify that all of those are true. All I know is that the car starts a tiny bit better than it used to. It's always been a good starter though, this car. Starts a tiny bit better. It's definitely more lively, and it's definitely more smooth. It's like the oil, the new synthetic oil, is getting everywhere it needs to get to. So that's my review of the Liqui Moly Proline engine flush. This is part 2. Part 3 will be just a very quick one, just to see what it does on fresh oil, and hopefully you'll watch that as well. So as always, thanks very much for watching, and I hope you find that useful.